Good afternoon. Are the judges ready for us to get started? Okay, great. My name is Drew Munson. My teammates here are Kat Jensen and Amie Pierone, and we are presenting today a new population in Orange that Televerde can employ to be their disempowered workforce. So the agenda, we're going to go through how we came to our disempowered group, our go-to-market strategy, and then also some stakeholder communications. So when we were thinking about what's going to define our ideal group, the process we took is we looked at what makes Televerde's current business model so successful and what are the characteristics of the female incarcerated employees that they have. So one thing that we found is we want our group to be motivated, so intrinsically motivated to do really good work and also improve their position in life. The other thing is grit. The telemarketer role, driving sales, like it's a very high stress role. So we want our population to be patient and have perseverance and really be able to thrive in like that sort of a work environment. Next is loyalty. One of the competitive advantages that Televerde currently has is that their telemarketers stay in that role for over 4 years on average. So we want our population to imitate that sort of loyalty to the company. And then finally, some of the technicalities are we want this population to have be able to speak multiple languages and also be legally allowed to work, legally allowed to be hired. So some of the populations we considered, and we focused in the UK because that's where Televerde wants to be expanding next. So we looked at homeless veterans, war veterans in the UK, also recovering drug addicts, prisoners in the UK again, and then refugees. And there's pros and cons to all these groups, but ultimately we settled on refugees. I'll tell you why. In the UK, there are 120,000 refugees. They're mostly from Europe, from Middle Eastern countries like Iraq, Iran, Syria, and of this population, 70% of them are unemployed. And because of that, a lot of them are homeless as well. So they certainly are disempowered. And this is a great opportunity for Televerde to come in and help this community out. There are a lot of great reasons to employ refugees. One of them is diversity. They come from a different country, different cultural background, and we all know that diversity is a winning strategy in the workplace. Another thing is that these people, they're coming in, they're seeking opportunity, and they really want to provide for their family, put food on the table and keep them safe. So they're going to be loyal to the first company that gives them that opportunity. IKEA has been hiring refugees in the UK to staff their stores, and they have achieved a 94% retention rate with the refugees that they hire in this market. So that's encouraging. Another thing about refugees is a lot of them have university education. 15% have been to school and have degrees. So that means when they come into Televerde, they can come at these bottom level positions, but they'll have the skills already to work their way up with the company as they grow in their careers. And then another positive externality of hiring refugees is the engagement you get from the other employees. So imagine you're at work and you see a refugee coming in, working the same job next to you, despite all of the challenges they've had in their lives. It's really motivational to the other employees. And it's also important when we think about refugees that the refugees, like that's not an identity that they have. It's really more of an experience that they're going through. And we think that Televerde is uniquely positioned to empower this group and help them get through this experience and return to a normal life. So now I'm going to hand it to Amie to talk about our target market.
Thank you. So now switching gears to think about the target market from a clientele perspective, we're proposing targeting emerging fintech companies in the UK for several reasons. First of all, the UK is sort of known to be this financial capital of the world, and specifically, fintech has been exploding in the UK, partially in part to the fact that the UK has very favorable conditions for entrepreneurs from a regulatory perspective. So considering that, the fintech industry is about a $20 billion industry worldwide, with almost half of that value in the UK itself at about $7 billion. And that's expected to explode over the next couple of years and ultimately dominate the UK economy. So considering that this landscape is going to become increasingly more competitive, there is that push to differentiate yourselves, and that marketing is going to be a real opportunity for Televerde to get in the door with these companies and sort of grow with them as they grow. So lastly, that's supported by the fact that advertising spend in the UK has been increasing for the last 8 years consecutively, and that trend is forecasted to continue in the future. So there's a real positive market opportunity there from that perspective. So thinking about our go-to-market plan, it's going to be essential for Televerde to articulate their value proposition. And we were very strategic after selecting the refugee population in the UK to say it's a very attractive thing for UK companies to partner with Televerde, because they're not only helping the greater good, as we talked about earlier this morning, but they're specifically helping their own economy and people in their community. So articulating that, Kat will talk about that a little bit more. Also, we want to set some goals, obviously, so we have a little bit more of a long-term orientation here because we are targeting these emerging companies to grow with them. So we want to start in 2020 with a goal of 10 deals and double the size of our business in the UK over 3 years, with the goal of contributing to the revenue growth that we also talked about this morning. And we would also like to propose that we have 300 refugees employed with Televerde by 2022 to sort of match the size of the prison population that we have here. Lastly, we want to touch about the internal support required to expand in this way. And there's definitely a training component here to think about. And we would like to partner with an existing nonprofit in the UK called Breaking Barriers that has its core competencies around training refugees to be prepared to work in the workforce in the UK. So there's a great partnership opportunity there with a group that already has this sort of on lockdown. And then for us, we want to employ additional training for specifically the fintech industry and the knowledge base that this incoming group would need to be successful in that. So I'll pass it to Kat for our messaging.
Thank you. So in thinking about how we want to communicate this to our potential clients and how we want to get this message across, we really wanted to tie back into the themes that we've already been using to really harken back to our mission. And so in that, we want to be talking about how we see potential in these underserved groups, and in how by us seeing that potential, you get to see results. We also really want to harken back to the idea that these emerging fintech businesses, what they're really getting out of this is they're bettering their community by partnering with us. And so we want to make sure that we're messaging to them that when they partner with us, they're helping their community and they're growing with us as we're growing. And so in that, we want to also make sure that we're considering our stakeholders, went too far. We want to make sure that we're considering our stakeholders. And Drew touched on some of the synergies that we see already between this group and other employees and how they can help to motivate those employees as they see their dedication. But we also see that there could be some risks in this group, specifically from a standpoint of racism and discrimination. And we see that this could happen in kind of 3 different areas. The first would be in the hiring process. And to mitigate that, we want to make sure that we're really partnering with the government, making sure that we understand all of the regulatory rules that go into hiring this population. We also see that it could come from internally, making sure that we do have those training classes and the cultural assimilation classes that are offered through Breaking Barriers already. And then finally, we see that there could be the potential coming from our customers and our community. And the way that we want to kind of mitigate that is through education. Currently, if a customer has any concerns about working with Televerde's population, a lot of where those concerns get mitigated is in just talking with the people and getting to see that they are more than their situation. They are people who have real feelings, are really dedicated, And just in more exposure to that, we can really help to break down these barriers. And with that, we'd like to open it up for questions.
Good presentation. A couple of questions. One is, did you do any revenue projections within the fintech industry, and did you take Brexit into consideration when you looked at fintech as a potential opportunity in a UK market?
So Drew is currently passing out some of our projections with the explosion in the marketplace. So we're seeing between the next 3 to 5 years, there should be about an 85% growth in this industry. And so that's kind of where we came up with these numbers of being able to meet those financial projections that were in the case by getting about like 5 to 6% of the market each year. I can pass it along to.
Yeah, so more specifically, we said on average, could we get 500,000 per deal? So with the 10 deals, that'd be 5 million, and then doubling each year. So 10 to 20 would be our goal, recognizing that we're probably not going to hit the kind of growth as discussed in the case just from the expansion in the UK, but also thinking about like growth organically in the existing business that we do have. Specifically about Brexit, that's a very interesting question because of the uncertainty there. I actually did a project on the UK economy in my macro econ class, and those were things that people were considering is, you know, what the haziness around regulatory changes. But despite that, the UK has still been moving up in rankings for doing business. So it's something to keep an eye on, but for the research that we did, it wasn't a huge concern to us.
And then I just have one more, if that's okay. My other question is, when you looked at the sort of new population, did you get a map of where the people are? Because that's really important. And then, you know, how would we source them? So you stated one organization. Is it just one organization, or are there other organizations that we would need to work with to ensure that we sort of maximize our ability to get the sort of, you know, the best talent?
Okay. So the refugees populations in the UK, they're primarily located in city centers. 30% of them live in London, with other populations in Oxford, Cambridge. So they're mostly in the urban areas. As far as the partners, Breaking Barriers has a big presence in London, and they've had successes with companies out of London. But there's other more regional areas that would serve those other regional markets. We just like Breaking Barriers because of the comprehensive set of services they already have. But if you wanted to set up shop in Cambridge or another city, you might want to look at the partners available, you know, specific to those regions.
Thank you.
So your slide mentioned startups. For most startups, they don't have money to do anything, and so that's not where you're going to get the revenues here. Just fintech in general is not startups, but are there examples of companies, and how mature are they, and any examples of companies that are earning $50 million to $100 million of real revenue that might be a target to sell to, more than just a startup?
Yeah, we probably should have been more clear about that word startup. I think emerging is maybe a better word, because there definitely are a number of companies who are bringing in that like $25 to $50 million revenue range that we were looking at. There's some examples in cybersecurity. I have a list of names I could share with you, but yeah, definitely on that lower end, like the 25 to 50 million, and then the idea being that we grow with them over the next couple of years as they are emerging.
That are fintech sort of companies.
Yes.
Okay.
We also, in regards to kind of the ones that are a little bit smaller and in growing with them, a lot of those companies are usually backed by VCs. And so we see that as a pretty good opportunity to kind of get in at the ground floor and really help bolster them. And that's kind of where the whole you grow, we grow kind of mindset comes from.
That is a source of cash. That's good.
Did you put any thought into the costs of doing business with your nonprofit partner? So what would it cost per person for them to be ramped up to be able to work for Televerde? And what would you have to invest in that nonprofit partner so that it's worth their while to be investing in this project?
So that's definitely something to put a little bit more thought into. We were more focused on the revenue growth for the time being and getting our footprint in there, recognizing that sort of the return on that might be more long term, but definitely something to consider.
Did you have any thoughts on how Televerde's current capabilities in delivering SaaS services would need to be either augmented or tailored or customized specifically for the fintech space?
So one of the great things about what Televerde does currently is they're really good at launching into new markets, because what they know how to do, what their core capability is they know how to sell something else. And so in like the training and when you're setting up a new account, a lot of research goes into who the target market is, how to message to them, everything kind of surrounding that campaign. And that's really the core competency that Televerde provides, is that knowledge base that even companies who are already in that space, they don't necessarily always think about, like, you know, this is how we can actually speak to these customers. So that's something that we feel pretty confident that that's well within the core competencies of Televerde already. We do think, as far as getting this new group in and training them, there's a little bit of a cultural assimilation part of that too, and that's where kind of we can lean on breaking barriers for that sort of additional training as well.
What sales cycle did you determine that you could get 10 deals on 5 million in 2020? And what was your reasoning behind it?
So considering the size of the fintech space in the UK, there are about like 1,600 fintech companies there. So for us, we were considering the revenue goals that Televerde has and thinking that we should be reasonable, that maybe capturing 10 deals, thinking about the average of that being 500,000 per deal to bring in that 5 million and then growing from there was the thinking, considering the size of the number of companies in the UK.
Different team, second time around. I have to say, I don't know what happened at lunch, but this is good in a great way. And yeah, no, I did not mean, no, really, great job. Should have given this out this morning. This answered a lot. Much better. Great job.
Refugees selling into fintech, and what about language issues? And it was 15% have college educations or something, and just any more about how that population will fit into this, because that's not a natural thing that I would think of.
So we believe in unleashing the human potential, and refugees certainly do have lots of human potential. These are people that are software engineers, they were plumbers, they had real jobs before this experience happened to them. So they should be able to receive the training specific to fintech and then hit the ground with their feet running.
As far as the language barrier, though, there are classes, again, going back to our proposed partner of Breaking Barriers, that they do offer classes to make sure that people are up to speed on the communication piece. So that's definitely something that we have considered would need to be addressed.
We also see that as sort of a benefit, that they do have these other cultural and language that they can tap into. And so then this is something that really helps us to expand even further past this market in the years after that.
Last thing too, sorry. Also, we talked about fintech in the UK, but I don't see us as being limited there. So just on the short-term horizon, we talked about the UK, but maybe expanding even into more markets internationally, where again, that diversity in the workforce would come into play as being advantageous.
So I think you may have been trying to keep my question out, because my next question was going to be about, did you actually look at the fintech market and who was currently serving the fintech market, and how Televerde's proposition could outplace or designate better than those that are already in that market, because it's hard to get into and penetrate a market.
Totally. I think a lot of these fintech companies are venture capital backed, and there's a data point that investors really like to see companies who are socially aware. So if these companies are partnering with us, knowing that the focus here is contributing to the greater good, serving this refugee population, I think that's going to be attractive to bring in more investors. So that's a strong proposition for them to partner with us over other companies who simply don't have this kind of model. This is a very unique thing to Televerde.
Good answer.